Welcome to The Strategic Edge, the podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners who want a competitive edge in the market. They want to be seen as the expert in their industry, and they're looking for cutting edge and innovative strategies that work across industries to help them scale their business like a boss. My name is Carden, and I'm your host. Welcome to the show. Hey everyone, I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Strategic Edge podcast. And this week, I have a phenomenal guest. I know you're going to love hearing everything she has to share with you. And I am with actually a good friend, Sarah Box. Sarah, welcome to my show.
Hi, Ann. It's super good to be here again with you. You know, you're one of my favorite people. First of all, you're so smart and you're so quick and you have a great sense of humor.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I bribed her before the show to say those things, but just kidding. Anyway, Sarah, tell everyone what it is you do. You're doing some very cool things in the nonprofit space, which is one of the reasons I really wanted you on here, because I know you have a lot of value to share to nonprofit organizations or business owners that as their business grows and scales and they have all this money and this time, they a lot of times want to start nonprofits. So I love what you're doing, but I would love for you to share with my audience what you are actually doing in that space.
Well, I love nonprofits because I came in as a volunteer probably close to 4 decades ago. And so I've seen, the impact from the grassroots level that volunteers can have. And then as I went through with that, I actually saw that all of that impact happens because there's a structure and there are processes and there are great leaders in the organizations. And just like in business, there are places where nonprofits stub their toes. So I went from being a volunteer. I've been a board member. I ran nonprofits and then was asked to help consult with and for nonprofits 25 years ago. And since then have been doing that work, either consulting directly with, now rather than single nonprofits, it's typically a coalition, a group of more than one nonprofit or an association. And then also the executives. If you think about it, it's like the decision makers in the nonprofit, to help them remember that they're business owners, help them navigate relationships. And really, Ann, what I'm passionate about is helping people say yes to the right things and having the guts to say no to the things that are tempting and might make them feel like their nonprofit is safe for the moment, but which actually put them at risk. Mm-hmm. Because it's a one-time or a perilous thing that they don't have capacity or actually even the heart or mission to be doing.
I love it.
Yeah, the tail wagging the dog kind of thing.
Yes. And a lot of times too, and you kind of talked about that they're, have the guts to make the decisions. Fear comes up a lot in business, right? With the people running the businesses. Am I making the right decision? And it sounds too like you're with your consulting that you're really kind of a confidant too, but you're also able to give them strategic advice and sound advice so that they can feel confident in the decisions that they're making for the organization. Would you say that's true?
I would say that's absolutely true. It was funny to me. One of the things I learned as I've grown over the years and have done assessments on myself and with organizations is that I default to being strategic, but I also have this huge thing of stepping back and wanting to make sure people are included. So it's that, what is the strategic thing to be doing here? And then what's the impact on the people, right? Short-term and long-term. And whether it's the people you're serving in your community or whatever your target audience is, or the people who are working alongside of you, to really think more holistically. And one of the places, and I think there are so many great leaders and decision makers in nonprofits, but they come at it from this sense of, I'm here to give, right? We can't benefit.
Right. Sounds like the coaching industry.
It is. Well, and so that's a lot of what I do with the executives, right? It's like, let's have a chat. Okay. What's really happening here? Because I'm watching, especially in the last year, it's been this way. It was this way when I was running a nonprofit, but I watched it when we had the .com bust, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Again, when we in 08 and 09, right? So more pressure gets pushed down at the community level to respond, often to nonprofits. Oh, they can do it. They're in the community, have the relationships. And then nothing comes to help them build infrastructure, right? So
Right.
the people with the big hearts, the directors, the board members, okay, we're just going to put our shoulder to the wheel and make it through this. But it takes a toll, and it also puts the organization at risk. So I'm able to see those things and then help the leaders in a safe way, where I am a confidant in that way because
Mm-hmm.
I've been there. So you
Yes.
can't tell me a feeling you've had about a board member or a staff member that I probably haven't had. Mistakes I haven't made, because I've made a lot. And if I were to go back and do it over again, I'd be taking some of the advice I offer today, because it would have
Right.
made my
If
road
you
a lot.
only had a you, right?
Well, I think I did have me, but I had them in bits and pieces, and I didn't know what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew I was getting by. I was doing well. Our organization was doing well, but somehow I never felt like I ever had my handle on it all because things kept changing quickly. And so that's why I'm a big strategy, but plus, that whole piece about what matters now
Mm-hmm.
and what can you do today instead of
Right.
putting everything so big, so far out that you just don't even start.
We need both. You need both a short-term strategy and you need a long-term vision and a long-term strategy. And a lot of people don't realize that in business. Everything can't be about now and not even looking outside of that, and everything can't be long term either. You
Right.
have to deal with what's right in front of you and what's in the near future. So I love that. And you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said, they're a business and they really have to treat it like a business, and that you can't just have the attitude to give, because if it doesn't survive, if it's not sustainable, they're not going to be there to give, right? So they have to have that mindset when they're in that kind of role.
Absolutely. And I think about it, it's like, and I ask when I'm working with organizations, I say, what is the impact to your community if you're not here 6 or 12 months from now? Oh, we'll be here. No, what's the impact? Then they start thinking of all the things that wouldn't really, what would happen?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so we need to make sure that's not the future you're creating by being short-sighted, not being willing to make some tough decisions, um, and realistic about long-term at the same time. It's an interesting balancing act, Anne, as
It
with
always is, right?
right?
It always
I
is.
always think it's good to have a plan and then
Mhm.
pivot.
Yes.
Pivot. But if you don't know where you're going, you'll pivot in any direction. It's like, okay, we'll do this, we'll do that. And it's like, okay, but you're going to end up somewhere you didn't plan on being because you didn't have a plan.
Absolutely. You and I speak the same language. I say that all the time. And especially when you know where you're going, it keeps you on course. So if you make a decision that starts steering you off course, you can course correct because you can recognize, oh, that's really taking us down the wrong path, or taking us down, I like to call it rabbit holes, taking us down a rabbit hole, right? And so I think it's really important for anyone in business, but even in life. I mean, we could just
Yep.
say this is in life too. If you don't have a plan or a vision or any kind of goals, I mean, you're just leaving everything to chance. And I know with nonprofits, a lot of them fail. And it probably is because they go in with a giving servant's heart, and they're leaving it to chance because, like you said, there's no infrastructure, there's no strategy, there's no goal, nothing is laid out, there's no kind of plan. You need a plan. It has to be flexible, but you still need a plan. And a lot of them don't survive or don't ever really, we had this discussion right before we started recording. A lot of them aren't even able to give back to the very thing that they're trying to raise money for, and the very reason they're there, because they're just barely surviving. So what would you like to add to that?
I think you summed it up really well. The other thing with that, along those lines of barely surviving, is the piece that when you have when you're starting something from passion, right? A lot of nonprofits are run by the original founder, right? They may be a board member, they may be the CEO or whatever. When they start out, you go through these stages. It's not uncommon, but that doesn't mean that person who had the passion to start that has the strategy or the systems or the business pieces that will make running the nonprofit easier. The other thing to know is nonprofits are an economic engine in this country of ours. There, it is a huge sector. We don't always recognize it, but they are hiring people who are doing service delivery at the front line. They are important as a business sector. And a number of them, people start their nonprofits. A lot of them will fail within the first few years. And mind you, you can start a nonprofit. There are government regulations for a nonprofit. So it's not like just easy money in and easy out. There are things you need to know, regulations, boards, all of that. It's not insurmountable, but you don't want to go in with your eyes closed. But the good you can do is so phenomenal. But it really does take understanding, what does that look like, having a plan, having a vision, like you said, being flexible. And I like, I do relate to the rabbit hole theory, because I love rabbit holes, but now I put myself, you can only dig in that hole for this much, right? So when I have clients and they go, well, I think we should try this, it's like, okay, what's the smallest amount of time you could pilot test that? Right? Let's just see. It might be perfect. Commit to a 3 or 5 year.
You can't be so rigid that you miss opportunity either. So yeah, I love what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's that whole blend of entrepreneur, business, and then the heart and possibility of the nonprofit sector. And that's really, I love that. I've tried to leave it and I cannot.
She's in it. One of the things that you said too, that I, really picked up on, I hope everyone else did too, is you talked about your experience and all the years that you've had in that. And I have to tell you, unless you have been in a situation for many, many years, even if, say, a CEO starts a nonprofit because he's run companies, it doesn't mean he understands the nonprofit piece, right? And so having all of that experience and everything, and being able to look at it with the nonprofit experience and eyes that you have is so, so valuable to them. That's why I love what you're doing. I just love it, because they need help too. And a lot of times they don't realize it. And it's because they do get really good people on their boards and, as directors and things that come from a lot of times great, jobs or great backgrounds, but it doesn't mean they understand that sector, and it's a whole different world, is it not?
Yes. It is different. It has different demands. I don't know anybody who works in a nonprofit, and I'm speaking just within this last year when I've had some really deep conversation with leaders in nonprofits. It shredded them that they couldn't have their staff there. They were stressed about their staff. They had to immediately implement remote work, but they tried not to cut services. They worried about things that were beyond their control because they love their staff, and their staff worried about the people they were serving, right? And they're still doing it to this day. Those are ongoing conversations. So it's that kind of caring that is so pervasive, and the relationships. And and I'm not saying that's across the board in all nonprofits. I will tell you that I've also known others that are very corporate in feel and wouldn't hesitate to just do what was expedient. But that is rare. And it's rare with the people I work with. Let me say that, because that's a select group. So, but yes, I think that it takes a different toll. You're more passionately connected to the mission and vision of that organization. And it gets people to start early. I don't know if you experience this, Ann, because you work with business people a lot, right?
Yes.
So we are up when we need to be and all this.
Yes.
Well, and we're used to scheduling and calendaring and all that. So I'm working with this group of nonprofits on a collective issue, and I'm watching over a couple months of meetings. And I'm looking at them and they're looking more tired than normal. And I said, so let me just ask a random question. What time did everybody start their day today? So most of them are up like 5, 6. What time was your first Zoom meeting? Oh man, I took a 6:30 and a this and a that. Now they're all in the same time zone. So this isn't to accommodate different time zones. I said, oh, did you get a chance to eat? I haven't had a chance yet. And this is a noon meeting we're on. I says,
Oh,
okay,
wow.
we're taking 5. I want you to go get something to eat and drink and come back. And then we're going to talk about why did you start? Well, because I was available. And I said, okay, you got to stop that.
Boundaries.
Well, because they thought, oh my God, there's all this need. All I
Mhm.
have to do is walk from my bedroom or wherever I was, start my computer, and I can start serving, right?
Mhm.
It takes a toll. So, you think you have
Well,
these
that's a good point.
rudimentary, it's like
Yeah.
block time on your calendar, say
Mm.
no,
Yes.
negotiate, right? Just,
Yeah.
I said, people will be flexible, set some boundaries, but you have to practice that because you're afraid like the opportunity will pass. You take care of you, someone else will suffer. And you think that people know that, but they don't when they're worried about it.
Right. Yeah, we're guilty of that. No, I think those are good points, and actually bringing that point up with the pandemic and everybody working from home, a lot of people have had to learn entirely new work ethics and new ways of working. You and I have been doing it for a lot of years, but it's new to a lot of people, and they've had to completely structure their lives around it, and it's that in itself has been a challenge for a lot of people
Yep.
on top of everything else.
And also recognizing that it's simple when you're all together. It's easier. It's not simple. It's easier when you're all together to just quickly put your heads together, look at something together and make it done.
Right.
Or you can see without even having a conversation, is something moving ahead as you thought it would be, right? Because you're in the environment, you can hear conversations and stuff. Well, you have to learn to have a lot of grace when you're working with people who you can't see. You can't all be knowing what's going on all the time. And you learn different communication skills to check in. So there's just a lot of
Definitely.
moving pieces. And for some folks, they said, I never signed up for that. That's not my strong suit. Do you want it to be? If you want it to be, let's work on it. Otherwise, let's find someone who can support you in that role without making you a failure. It's not a failure to know your limitations.
Right. I love it. And so some of the things that I'm also hearing you say and what you do is you're a confidant to them. You're a kind of a trust advisor. But you also consult them from the business
I
side
do.
of things as well. So you kind of fill different roles there, almost like a life coach, business coach.
It's a weird blend. I like to think, and it's funny, it's a weird blend of roles. You're right. And when I first started doing this work, when I left my partnership, sold my partnership back in a consulting firm, and I had, you do all your social media stuff, I'm thinking, okay. So I put myself down on one as Sherpa, right? Because that's kind of my role with people. It's like, I know the tools, I can get you up the path. You've got to walk it. I'm not going to do it for you. I can help you on the tactical pieces, but I can also listen when you say, oh my God, the going's so hard. And I can help you dissect. Is it hard because you're making it hard, or it's truly a steep climb? Do you need, those kind of things. And when you think about yourself being a CEO, just consider you're all in the same town, because nonprofits are linked through their funders and they all know it, right? So if you don't perform, funders talk. And so there's a connection there. It can be risky to share your vulnerabilities. And so to have someone you can say, hey, I'm worried about this, or be in a group with people just like you. And I don't mean they do the same nonprofit work, but have the same concerns and they're at the same decision-making level, and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or does anybody have a thought about this, and have an honest conversation. That's invaluable. So I think of myself as a strategic vision coach and a Sherpa along the way.
I love it. I love it. And, one of the things that is important for people to realize is when they get to, especially the top, or in a position where they have to be super careful about what they're doing, it's important for them to have someone like you, or like you said, to be in a group, be in a mastermind. Too many people try to sort of handle it all on their own, but they go home, they can't talk to their spouse. They have to be careful, confidentiality. They have to be careful about what they say. And like you said, they're so involved in the community, they have to be careful. So it's really important, I think, even for people's health and for their success too, but also for their mental health and their physical health, to have someone that they can depend on and can rely on to get that stuff out and off of their chest, and be able to talk it through, and to even have confidence in decisions that they make, and not have all the stress on themselves. A one-man show, so to speak.
Well, and that's easy to default to that.
It is, because they're at the top, right?
It's easy to do it. And there's that image. And I know people say, oh, just be authentic. I'm thinking nonprofit leaders going, I'll be authentic, but I'm not going to damage the reputation or my relationships, because that will damage the organization. So
that's a really good point too. Yes. Yeah. And people can say be authentic all you want. There still is a responsibility.
Absolutely.
Right. Because everything has consequences. And everybody doesn't need to know everything anyway.
Sometimes don't you think, do I care about that? I don't think I do.
Right, exactly. So I think that's a really good point. And being authentic doesn't mean, having everything out there for the whole world to know and to see. And it basically just means kind of be yourself. And that's really that's really what.
And it's so nice to be able to shine as who you are.
Yes. And not have to be fake about it. Right.
Yeah. Or like, you need to be this, you have to posture in this. Mm-hmm. And there are such great leaders who are so different from one another. And yet they all have the same tasks in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love it. So you have shared great information. One thing that we talked about, though, is that nonprofits need to realize they are a business. So can you just talk about some of the things? I know we talked about infrastructure, and, they show up with a servant's heart, or want to give. What are some other things that you would like to share in the business side of things, Sarah?
First of all, I do believe every nonprofit should have a strategic plan, better yet, a strategic business plan that includes your forecast, financial forecast, but at a minimum, a strategic plan that sets your short and long-term goals and your operational, your tactical things for at least 12 to 15 months, recognizing they'll be flexible. Mm-hmm. They need to also invest time in building a board that is diverse. And I'm not talking just diverse in labels, but diverse in skill sets, as well as knowledge and experience. And depending upon what your purpose is in the world, what you're trying to do, representative of the work that you're trying to do. I mean, there are great resources for that. The other thing they need to do is invest in HR. So how are you growing your people? Who's going to be, and this is a conversation that sets EDs, executive directors, and boards on edge, right? And I often push it. It's like, what's your succession plan? Oh, no, they're not leaving. I said, not yet. But what if they won the lotto and they were going to be gone for a year? What would you do? Well, we're not there yet. I go, let's get there, right? There's no succession plan. So just some of those basics. How will this go on without you? But so having a plan, identifying your successes and your metrics, what will signal success for your organization, and telling your story. Because if you can't engage your community and the people who support you about the work you're doing and the impact you're having, not just how busy you are, but what difference are you making, right? And also to stand up for yourself when it comes to infrastructure. So I always think when people say, I'm going to donate, but I only want it to go to a program, and I find out what business they run. And I said, okay, so the analogy here is, if you're running an automobile store, and I said, here's $10,000, you can only buy parts with it. Well, I need labor. I'm sorry, I will help pay for your parts, but I'm not going to pay for your labor. Well, that's not any good to me. I'm thinking, right. So you can fund programs all you want, but you need to fund the people who make that happen. And that includes admin and infrastructure costs for that. So it's just thinking about what does it actually take, not to get by, but to do great work so you can do more of it.
Right, right. That's great advice. I hope anyone that's thinking of starting a nonprofit, becoming involved in a nonprofit, or has a nonprofit, I really, really hope that you will listen to a lot of the things Sarah has shared, because I feel like she's really just opened the door and shown you exactly what it does take and what's involved, so that you just have a better understanding of all of that. So I love what you're doing, Sarah Box.
I feel the same about you, Ann Carden. And and for folks who might not remember, one of the things, Ann, she's fun. Ann's a fun person. And you can tell because she likes to laugh.
On my good days, right?
I don't know. Then I've never been around you on a bad day.
That's cool. Okay.
There
I don't really have very many of them.
I wouldn't think so. You don't strike me that way. But one of the things you did that I think about this sometimes when I'm looking overhead and stuff is, I remember when you parachuted out of the plane in those pictures.
Yeah.
That's Ann. Bye-bye. I'm going.
Yep.
So
taking the jump.
Yeah. So for people who are listening to this podcast, just know you're with a host that takes a jump but is prepared to go. So
there you go.
I've just had fun being on the show with you, Ann, and I want to thank you for inviting me to be a guest.
You are welcome. It's always a pleasure. It is always a pleasure talking to you and catching up. And I don't think we've had really this discussion that we had today. So that was great. Sarah, thank you again. And how can people get a hold of you? And the one thing I didn't ask you is, how are you getting your clients from, with the nonprofits? How are you getting them? A lot of my clients
are referral.
Okay.
From either consultants who don't work with that type of person or don't want to work with that type of person, right? They do a different thing. I'll get referrals that way. I get referrals from past clients, like give Sarah a call. I also get clients or people that I'm coaching through them participating in a course that I have or an online tool. And then I pro bono, I do some work with the Social Enterprise Alliance, which is a national organization of social enterprise businesses. So businesses specifically set up for social good. And I do some coaching with that. But the easiest way to reach out is, we're on all the media, but if you go to my website, sarahbox.com, www.sarahbox.com, it's got links to the podcast, to our blogs, which have a ton of information in the blogs. They're meant to be educational about strategy and different aspects. And I said the podcast, and then any of the courses and offerings that are available at a time are there. And just get on our email list and we'll make sure that you're in the know when things become available. And I'd love to, if someone wants to reach out and have a half-hour strategy session just to see like where they're at, they got a question, you can sign up for one there as well.
There you go. And she does have a great podcast, the No Limits podcast. Am I saying that right? I think that's right.
No Labels, No Limits. Yep.
No Limits. Yes. I've been a guest on Sarah's podcast as well. That was a while back, but, and it's a great podcast too. So definitely check that out. And I know it's on all the major channels and stations. So we will put obviously all of your contact information in the show notes, and this will be on YouTube, and it will also be on Google and Apple and Spotify, so you can listen to
all the usual spots.
So you can listen to it in multiple places, but all of Sarah's contact information will be on there. But you can also reach her through LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, she's extremely active on LinkedIn, and that's a great place to reach out to her as well. So Sarah, thank you again. It was so much fun catching up with you and having you on. And I know you just gave massive value. And please, if you are in a nonprofit or you need help, you need that trusted advisor, that confidant, that person who knows her stuff, knows what she's doing, by all means, reach out to Sarah and have a conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ann.
Until next time, everyone, God bless you and have an amazing week. Bye-bye.